Welcome to Jackson State International Education Program's Music of France concert. This performance highlights our study abroad opportunities all over the world, but most particularly those programs in which Professor Tim Britt and Dr. Anna Esquivel will be participating in the summer of 2022. If you would like to study statistics in Paris with Professor Britt for 3 weeks, or study literature with Dr. Esquivel in Paris as well as other European capitals, this is a taste of music from that region. The International Education Program is excited to bring Luna Nova to Jackson State for this performance. Since its formation in 2002, Luna Nova has performed over 350 concerts in colleges, museums, churches, and concert halls across the country. Its repertoire consists of recognized masterworks as well as works by emerging composers. With concerts, masterclasses, and private instruction, Luna Nova maintains a strong commitment to the education of performers and listeners. Luna Nova is the core ensemble for the Belvedere Chamber Music Festival held each June in Memphis, Tennessee. Performers in the Music of France project are Daniel Gilbert on violin, Nobuko Igarashi on clarinet, Paul Murray, voice, Robert Patterson on horn and composition, Brian Ray, piano, and Patrick Scott, organ. The International Committee presents this concert in honor of our longtime colleague, Professor Mary Wadley, who is retiring. Professor Wadley has been the face of international education at Jackson State for over 30 years. She's promoted travel abroad by taking scores of students, faculty, and friends on trips to Spanish-speaking countries across the globe. She advocated tirelessly for Jackson State's participation in the Tennessee Consortium for International Studies and has promoted study abroad through tenses to our students for the last decade. Mary is a tremendous colleague and friend, and we wish Mary and Bob well in their new adventures. Thank you for attending our concert. Enjoy.
The organ in France has seen two main eras, the French classic era and the French romantic era, French symphonic, much like an orchestra. The first, the French classic, has to do not only with composers of music and the actual dates, but it also has to do with the actual layout of the organ. The organ we're so used to today is the one that Bach would have played in Germany, with full pedal boards, full sounds, full keyboards. And the thing that's so unique to the organ is its use of pedals and of feet. And we think of the music of Bach, of much organ music that we know of today, and the feet play a very important role of moving along. But the French classic organ wasn't necessarily that case. The pedals was not necessarily used for the low bass sounds that we think of, but it was more used for the cantus firmus line, the melody or the tune. The pedals themselves were actually shorter. There were fewer pedals, and so they were much more difficult to play, which is why it was much easier for them to play one slower note at a time versus quicker movements. The actual registers, the sounds, the stops of the organ were similar but also different. The French classic uses much more of instruments we would think of in chamber music, so individual sounds, clarinets and trumpets and oboes, and English horns and crumb horns and all the antique reeds that we think of in chamber music or early music. And so that was the same for the organ. And as we'll hear later, the symphonic organ kind of combines all of these together like a huge orchestra. And so the two pieces we'll play today are by Francois Couperin, who actually lived at around the same time as Bach. And again, like I said previously, we hear of the music of Bach and the feet are just going and going and going, but at the same time in France, the organ had not quite made it there yet. So in these two pieces I'll play today, the pedals actually don't play a role at all. It's just the manuals. There are two Kyries from Latin from the church, and one uses the clarinet stop of the organ. It's supposed to be a crumb horn, and then the next one uses a solo trumpet of the organ.
Francis Poulenc found fame and recognition as a composer who continued the paths of French modernism established by Erik Satie, Claude Debussy, and Maurice Ravel. While the majority of Poulenc's chamber music consists of the sonatas composed for a single wind instrument and piano, he also composed 2 sonatas for strings, one for cello and one for violin. During the Second World War, Poulenc returned to his home in Noisy in central France. It was here that he composed his sonata for violin and piano in 1942-43 at the request of violinist Jeanette Neveu. Poulenc and Neveu premiered the sonata in 1943. Composed as an act of resistance during the German occupation of France, the work was dedicated to the memory of the great Spanish poet Federico Garcia Lorca, an exact contemporary of Poulenc. Lorca fought and was killed by fascists in the Spanish Civil War in 1936. The sonata's second movement, Intermezzo, is inscribed with the opening words from Lorca's poem, The Six Strings. The guitar makes the dreams weep. The movement is subtly imbued with the rhythmic and melodic inflections of Spanish music, especially the cante hondo, or deep song of folk music. Both the violin and the piano imitate the gestures of the Spanish guitar, such as strung chords or broken pizzicato gestures. Lili Boulanger was born into a family of musicians. Her older sister, Nadia, became the most outstanding composition professor of the entire 20th century. Her students included Aaron Copland, Elliott Carter, and Philip Glass. Nadia wrote about her sister Lili that she represents the best, the most intimate, and the most profound in my life. Lili suffered from poor health throughout her short life. At the age of 2, she contracted a case of pneumonia, which was the source of chronic bronchial issues. She may also have suffered from undiagnosed Crohn's syndrome. Despite these illnesses, Lili learned to play several instruments, including the organ, piano, harp, violin, and cello. She soon decided to become a composer and, at the age of 16, enrolled in the Paris Conservatory. Lili Boulanger was the first female winner of the prestigious Prix de Rome competition in 1913. She was influenced by the aesthetics and harmonies found in music inspired by the symbolist movement, and she was deeply immersed in the music of Claude Debussy. Boulanger composed many art songs, a few piano pieces, a small amount of chamber music, and a substantial amount of choral music. Today, we will perform the Nocturne from 1911. It was originally composed for flute and piano. In this piece, the composer quotes the descending flute phrase that opens Debussy's prelude to the Afternoon of the Faun. Our second piece, Cortège, was composed while she was studying in Rome. Lili Boulanger was only 24 years old when she passed away in March 1918. Claude Debussy composed 24 pieces for solo piano, to which he gave the title Prelude. Published in 2 volumes, the first volume of 12 appeared in 1910 and the second in 1913. These works employed the latest musical vocabulary of the day: whole tone scales, pentatonic scales, octatonic scales, non-functional parallel chords, and the use of modal harmony to subvert the direction of diatonic harmony. These 24 preludes were as revolutionary to the art of piano music in the 20th century as the piano works of Franz Liszt and Frédéric Chopin were in the 19th century. In the scores of the Debussy prelude, the titles appear at the end of each piece, implying that the title was only a suggestion and that the listener might legitimately supply an alternate meaning. Debussy's titles were the result of his personal biography and aesthetics, as well as the influence of the allusive language of the symbolist poets. The first piece today, Voile, or Sails, floats layers of pentatonic melodies over a low B-flat pedal point in imitation of boats docked in a harbor as they waver back and forth in the breeze above a submerged anchor. La Fille aux Cheveux de Lin, or The Maid with the Flaxen Hair, was inspired by a pastoral poem by Leconte de Lisle, which describes the idle singing of a pretty blonde Scottish girl with red lips who stands in a field on a summer day. Ondine displays the flow of water and the motions of an ondine, a water sprite, similar to a mermaid, found in much European folklore. The final prelude of the collection of 24, Feux d'artifice, or Fireworks, is a portrait of July 14th, Bastille Day. Debussy was committed in his devotion to France and its culture, and this picture of a Bastille Day celebration with its blazing fireworks concludes with a quiet presentation of a bit of the Marseillaise, the French national anthem.
Jacques Ibert composed his Quatre Chansons de Don Quixote in 1933 for the film release of Don Quixote, the first film with sound in all of Spain, starring the legendary operatic bass Feodor Chaliapin. Unbeknownst to Ibert, the film studio also reached out to other leading composers of the day, including Manuel de Falla, Darius Milhaud, and Maurice Ravel, with similar commissions. When they revealed their secret competition and Ibert was crowned the winner, it caused him a little bit of embarrassment to have publicly snubbed his friend and colleague Maurice Ravel, who for his part was so angry he almost got into legal action with the filmmakers. Fortunately for history, Maurice Ravel backed off the edge. His and Ibert's friendship continued, and Ravel's set of Don Quixote songs, Don Quixote Dulcinea, became very beloved parts of the repertoire. Now Brian and I will perform for you Jacques Ibert's Quatre Chansons de Don Quixote.
château neuf, ce nouvel édifice, tout enrichi de marbre et de porphyre. Qu'amour bâtit château de son empire, où tout le ciel a mis son artifice. Et un rempart, un fort contre le vice, où la vertu maîtresse se retire, que l'œil regarde et que l'esprit admire, forçant les cœurs à lui faire service. C'est un château fait de telle sorte que nul ne peut approcher de la porte. Si des grands rois, il n'a sauvé sa race. Victorieux, vaillant et amoureux, nul chevalier t'en soit aventureux sans être tel, ne peut gagner la place. Un homme dure la journée, si je ne vois ma dulcinée. Mais amour a peint son visage afin d'adoucir ma langueur. Dans la fontaine et le nuage, dans chaque aurore et chaque fleur. Un homme dure la journée, si je ne vois ma dulcinée. Toujours proche et toujours lointaine, étoile de mes longs chemins, le vent m'apporte son haleine. ici la dame de mes songes qui m'exalte au-dessus de ce siècle debout. Son cœur de diamant est vierge de mensonge, la rose s'obscurcit au regard de sa joue. Pour elle, j'ai tenté les hautes aventures, mon bras délivré, la princesse en servage. J'ai vaincu l'enchanteur, confondu les parjures, et ployé l'univers à lui rendre l'hommage. Dame par qui je vais, seul sous cette terre, qui ne soit prisonnier de la fausse apparence. Je soutiens contre tout, chevalier téméraire, votre éclat non pareil et votre présalence. Ne pleure pas, mon beau. Ton maître n'est pas mort, il n'est pas loin de toi. Il vit dans une île heureuse où tout est pur et sans mensonge, dans l'île enfin trouvée où tu viendras un jour, dans l'île désirée, ô mon ami sans chaud. Les livres sont brûlés et font un tas de cendres. Si tous les lèvres m'ont tué, il suffit d'un pour que je vive, fantôme dans la vie et réel dans la mort. Tel est l'étrange sort du pauvre Don Quichotte.
We heard earlier from the French classic organ, and now we'll hear from the French romantic organ, the French symphonic organ, that takes on the life of a symphony orchestra. Much fuller sounds, beginning from the bottom up with low voices mixed with all of the in-between voices. The sound is much fuller and broader, much like that of Germany during Bach's time. The sound had finally made it from Germany to France, and they wanted to be a part of it. The style of organ music differs a little too. The articulation, as we heard earlier, was very delicate, very crisp, very clean, as you heard the in-betweens from the left hand and the right hand, soloing out the trumpets and the clarinets and all the inner workings of it in between. The symphonic and romantic style of organ playing includes the articulation, of course, but moves to a much more legato style. You can't hear measure for measure necessarily with articulation, but the sound just grows and grows and grows. This next piece is by Louis Vierne, who is one of the famed organists at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. And he wrote this piece, the Carillon de Westminster, based on the tower bells from the Palace of Westminster, as we know as Big Ben. You'll hear the tune in the hands and in the feet.
Hi, I'm going to read a poem by Paul Verlaine, a French poet of the 19th century. Il pleut dans mon cœur comme il pleut sur la ville. Quelle est cette langueur que pénètre mon cœur? Oh, bruit doux de la pluie par terre et sur les toits, pour un cœur qui s'ennuie, oh, le chant de la pluie. Il pleut sans raison dans ce cœur qui s'écœure. Quoi? Nue trahison? Ce deuil est sans raison. C'est bien la pire peine de ne savoir pourquoi. Sans amour et sans haine, mon cœur a tant de peine.
I'm going to read today Le Feuille Blanche by Paul Valéry. It's a poem about the imposing nature of the blank page. As a composition teacher, I talk with students about how scary that page can be when we go to write, and this is a poem about that act of creativity. In truth, a blank sheet declares by the void that there is nothing as beautiful as that which does not exist. On the magic mirror of its white space, the soul sees before her the place of the miracles that we would bring to life with signs and lines. This presence of absence overexcites and at the same time paralyzes the definitive act of the pen. There is in all beauty a forbiddance to touch, from which emanates I don't know what of sacred that stops the movement and puts the man on the point of acting in fear of himself. And this is the French version. En vérité, une feuille blanche nous déclare par le vide qu'il n'est rien de si beau que ce qui n'existe pas. Sur le miroir magique de sa blanche étendue, l'âme voit devant elle le lieu des miracles que l'on ferait naître avec des signes et des lignes. Cette présence d'absence surexcite et paralyse à la fois l'acte sans retour de la plume. Il y a dans toute beauté une interdiction de toucher. Il en amène je ne sais quoi de sacré qui suspende le geste et fait l'homme sur le point d'agir, se craindre soi-même.